Hello, and welcome to the Hit Like a Girl podcast. My name is Joy Rios, and today I'm talking with Maya Saeed, who's the CEO and founder of Outcomes4Me, which is a free mobile app that helps breast cancer patients navigate their cancer diagnosis and treatment more comprehensively through an AI-powered platform to empower patients and support shared decision-making with their providers. Maya is laser focused on improving outcomes, and it was a real pleasure to get insight into her professional journey. Take a listen.
Thank you for having me. So I'm Maya Saeed. I'm the founder and CEO of Outcomes4Me, and we are a patient empowerment platform to helps patients that have been diagnosed with cancer be empowered to navigate the healthcare system and also advocate for themselves.
I mean, that's a really needed service, because I imagine that you are reaching patients at like one of the most vulnerable times of their life and then offering them resources. Can you give me a little bit more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we focus on cancer, and today we're actually live in one cancer, which is breast cancer. I mean, all of us know, or either on a personal basis, or have been in touch with people that have been diagnosed with cancer. And beyond the shock when one is diagnosed with cancer, the immediate questions is, how is my life going to change? What are my options? And how is my life going to change? And how can I best manage this, right? And the problem today is there's no way for any of us to answer these questions easily, right? At the same time, the science is advancing at rapid speed, and there's a lot of new opportunities, better treatment for cancer. So really, the reason we created this platform is to really help people advocate for themselves, to help them answer the question, what are my options? To help them answer the question, how can I best manage my care? How can I best manage my life? So that's really what we're after.
Well, and I imagine it's not going to be the same answer for every patient. And is it a little like a choose your own adventure, like a little bit of a decision tree of if you fall under this category, here are your options, choose path A, B, or C? Like, can you maybe walk me through what that journey would be like for somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. So today, if to answer these questions, putting aside what we have built, what we're building, anything else that we do is more or less equivalent to a Google search. And the problem of a Google search is we have to know what we're looking for to find it, right? So we have to know, as people that all of a sudden got diagnosed with the disease, what is important for that disease, right? So if it's breast cancer, I have to know that, there's a number of receptors that are important, HER2 status, hormone status, etc. And I'm not equipped to do that, right? Like, we're not equipped to do that. This is something that from one day to the other, just came upon us, and we're trying to figure it out. So that's the first problem that people have. The second problem is, even if we knew exactly what we were looking for, we are not equipped to understand and parse out the information that comes back at us. So essentially what we've developed is what we call a personalized evidence-based platform. Personalized, so meaning people don't look for things. So the very first thing we try to understand is, what is the diagnosis? So to do that, we specifically ask questions that people can have the answer to, or if they don't, they can actually find out what the answer to them is. And then we start by first providing people with treatment information, so specific treatment options. And actually, one of the very first things we've done when we started the company is we have partnered with the NCCN, which is the National Cancer Center Network. It's a collection of over 35 of the best cancer centers in the United States. And they're the clinical authority for physicians on treatment options. So we bring that to bear to people, to me, you, our friends, so that they can truly understand what their personalized treatment options are.
Well, so then they're not just getting a random Google result, right? You're getting results that have already been filtered by experts who know what they're talking about.
Exactly. And it's actually more than that, because in cancer, the science is evolving very, very fast. Which is a great thing, right? Every day there's more things that are discovered, there's more treatment options. So what that means that even the physician, unless they're in the research, they're not necessarily always up to date on the latest treatment. So we provide all this to patients so that they can have the conversations with their physician.
So can we talk about that? Because I'm sure you are much more well-versed in this than I am. What are some of the most innovative ways of, cancer treatment, or just different things that have come up that have either are not that many people know about or may not be on people's radar? What technology or new information is out there that really should be shared?
Yeah, so to give you an example, as I mentioned, we're right now live in one cancer, which is breast cancer. And if I look at breast cancer, there's been a lot of recent advances, very exciting advances in breast cancer. So, first of all, if caught early enough, breast cancer is, more or less a curable disease. But even if caught late, so there's some recent advances in metastatic breast cancer this year alone that are around targeted therapies, that are based on specific gene mutations. That then also for quite a few people, they can forgo chemo and have targeted treatments that really changes also the quality of life. And that keeps on evolving. So just to give you an example, as I mentioned, we have partnered, we integrate the NCCN guidelines and make them, these are physician-facing guidelines, we make them patient-facing. And so these guidelines typically update once a year and on an ad hoc basis throughout the year if needs be. This year alone, they updated over 7 times, which essentially shows every time there's a scientific advancement, they update. So it just shows you how rapidly some of the science is advancing.
Well, so something you said earlier is we all likely know somebody who has, been affected by breast cancer. Is what you're telling me that it might not be as scary because there are treatments that are more effective, that it doesn't necessarily have to be worst case scenario, that there are better case scenarios for people that have breast cancer now?
Yeah, exactly. And the reason we created this is because we want to have this information rapidly disseminate to people, right? So that, when something is approved, when there's results, also clinical trials. There's a lot happening on the clinical trial side that actually is, we're not talking about phase 1 trials, we're talking about phase 3 trials, pretty advanced clinical trials where things are working or, they're expanding. So for people to really have access to all this.
So I imagine that people that are interfacing with your product and service and the information that you're providing feel, to your point, very empowered and maybe less scared, and just in a, with a path of what to do. And it's personalized too.
Yeah, and I think what's very important, and you mentioned, and that's why I love the, kind of what you guys are about and the mission you do is, in some sense, healthcare has evolved where, the system has become not only so complex and so fragmented, but somewhere along the way, we forgot about the patient, I would say, right? We forgot about what are the needs of the patients. And it starts also with emotional needs. So what you said, right? Like a person diagnosed with cancer, from one day to the other, their life fundamentally changed. They lost control. And they're looking for control and they're looking for hope, right? And you get a sense of control and hope only if you feel empowered, if you feel you have the information that gives you back control, that gives you back hope, which is really what we're about.
I really love that. So how did you get into this? Did you know that this was your career path from an early age?
So it's interesting you say that. So first of all, I come from a family of medical doctors. So, healthcare was somewhere always in the background. I really thought I was going to be a medical doctor, but then I went to school and I got interested by engineering. So I did, bioengineering, and then I ended up in the pharmaceutical industry. So I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 15 years until starting this company. But the reason I started the company is, so I've been all my professional career in healthcare, and in particular in the pharmaceutical industry, and I have convinced myself that we're patient focused, because that's what everybody in healthcare attempts to be patient focused. We all try, right? And then a few years ago, I ended up having a medical scare. So it wasn't cancer, but I ended up having, becoming a patient for the first time in my life. And, it was short-lived. I ended up being a patient just for 6 months. But what I found out is I was actually surprisingly overwhelmed by the experience. First, to figure out what it was it something that was malignant or not? So that was overwhelming. And then just navigating the healthcare system. I had to have surgery, just, dealing with that, dealing with the medical bills. And then I kind of realized that, all my life, I had convinced myself that I was patient focused, but I had never been a patient in my life. And when I became one, it was overwhelming in ways that surprised me, and I never expected them to be.
Well, and I bet you probably, I'm guessing that you might have thought that if anybody was well equipped to navigate the system, it would be somebody who's been working in healthcare for so long. And that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I mean, just to tell you a small anecdote, I used to run market access and pricing for the oncology business of Novartis. And part of my day job was my customers were payers, were Blue Cross Blue Shield, like all the payers. And then here I am as a patient receiving for the first time in my life a Blue Cross Blue Shield bill. I kid you not, I could not, it took me a few minutes to figure out how to read it. I thought I owed them like $50,000. But this is just to tell you, this was my day job. And now to see it as a patient, I just couldn't read it.
So then what do you think have been some of the biggest tools or resources or implementations in your approach so that you could really feel like you truly are patient facing?
Yeah, so here's the problem, I believe, today in the healthcare system. And it's nobody's mistake, but it's just how the healthcare system has evolved. The healthcare system has evolved so that we as patients interact with it episodically. What that means is, we get a disease and then we're seeing a doctor, we're seeing them in 2 weeks, we're, taking, so it's happening as episodes. And in fact, there's something called the episodes of care in the healthcare system, right? But we as patients do not experience the disease episodically, right? We experience this continuously. And for something as serious as cancer, it becomes part of our life. Nothing in the healthcare system interacts with us on a continuous manner, because everything in the healthcare system is looking at it from a different stakeholder point of view. So what we do differently and what we attempt to do differently is we essentially we reverse the equation, right? We start with the patient. And as I mentioned, I gave you an example, we start with the treatment options, but that's not all we do. To be successful, we fundamentally believe that not only we have to put patient first and truly understand what patients need, but also to meet them where they are. And this is a word that's overused, I think. But meeting people where they are, what we mean by it is meeting them clinically, what's their diagnosis, meeting them where they are physically, the location matters, where they are emotionally, where are they in their journey, what are they looking for? And there's all kinds of different aspects, demographically, other aspects. So if you start having that as a lens and trying to develop a product that's focused on that first, then it fundamentally changes the whole lens in terms of how you see things.
I really like that as a visual, and just to helping people, because you're right, that is a term that's overused quite a bit. Oh, we're good. So what does that mean? If you're meeting a patient where they are, does that mean that that you're on their phone and that they can access you whenever they're on their phone. But it sounds like it's something much bigger than that, right? And like more holistic of an approach. How would you actually identify where somebody is emotionally? Is that like a quiz that somebody takes? Like how does that happen?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and again, as I just want to emphasize, I mean, this is our aspiration. I cannot claim today that we're there, right? I mean, it would be foolish to even attempt to say that. However, it's more the way we do product development, the way we think about all the features we put in the product. It's more, what are the elements that help us understand where patients are, right? Whether it's asking them questions, whether it's understanding in their clinical, diagnosis, or if they're feeling a set of symptoms, how do we actually bring that to bear? So it's a number of things. It's not a single thing that we use, but we try to kind of hone in to better understand where people are so that we can give them the information, help them navigate as they need it.
I love that. I mean, do you have any like anecdotes or stories around like success stories of somebody who, had really great outcomes based and because of their interaction with your offering?
Yeah, so it's about making people more aware of things that if either they may not be aware of, or they don't realize how important they are. So I'll give you a couple examples. So one recent example. So we've partnered to help raise awareness on genetic testing, inherited cancer genetic testing. And initially, when we surveyed people that were using the platform, a lot of people, so this is, for example, the RCA genes. There are a number of genes that if people have them, it increases the probability of them having a cancer. But the first time we surveyed people, a lot of them told us, well, it's too late. I already have breast cancer. Why do I care whether I had one of the inherited cancer genes? And so we went through a whole educational program, and we helped patients get actually testing to explain that, first of all, they are, depending what age people got diagnosed, if they have other family members, they may meet criteria for genetic testing. But what's more important is if a person has the gene, they could do something about it, because it fundamentally increases. If I take the BRCA gene as an example, it greatly increases the risk of recurrence, the risk of another breast cancer, or the risk of ovarian cancer, which is much, much harder to detect. And people could do something about it, which actually saves lives. So we had a number of people that were not aware that this was important, that were able to get tested. So that's one example. Another example is it's also around, because the science is evolving so that more and more things about your genes, about tests are becoming available that allows people to either have access to the new treatments or to determine the risk of developing another cancer or recurrence. So that's where we've seen a lot of opportunities there.
I mean, I know it's old news, but remember however many years ago when 23andMe went through their whole deal, and it was around the time that Angelina Jolie found out that she was positive for like BRCA1 and BRCA2 or whatever, and then made some like significant life choices, right? With that information. I'm guessing that where we are now, that when people do their genetic testing, they're empowered to do something similar, and that there's less question about like the efficacy of the information that they're given, right? Before there was questions around it being FDA approved or, any other sort of stuff. So, I mean, where we've come in what we know about this information, I don't know. Again, you're going to know more than I do. Is there?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. But also, so you mentioned 23andMe, and here's something that actually, a lot of people don't know. So if you do the 23andMe test for those genes, it's not a definitive test unless a person has an Ashkenazi Jew background, because that's kind of the variant that they're testing for. But if not, that test is meaningless, you need a different kind of test, which is still available from companies like Invitae or Color, which are called clinical grade tests. But even that, a lot of people are not aware of that. And what happens is, you're right. I mean, actually, it's we remember all that time with Angelina Jolie, etc. But then there's new generation that come, and then they don't know this history either.
I don't like to think that I'm that old. I don't feel that old, but then sometimes I hear about people, so I was like, oh, I guess, yeah, it's part of
Yeah,
it.
but there's also, there's other things. So another thing that a lot of people don't realize in cancer is most of the time clinical trial is the best treatment option. So we have this stereotype about what a clinical trial is and is not. But in cancer, it's a very different type of endeavor in terms of how clinical trials are done, how they're compared, etc. So one of the things that also we help quite a few people is not only raise awareness about clinical trials, but help them find the clinical trials that they're matched to. That for them, it created an alternative options. And it also, it's very important, to go back to this notion of meeting people where they are. When it comes to cancer, people have different preferences, right? Especially because a lot of the treatments are toxic, whether it's chemotherapy, etc. So, there's sometimes a trade-off to be made on quality of life versus, the treatment you're taking.
Absolutely.
And for people to understand that, to understand what the choices are, is very important. And what we've seen is, depending on where people are and how who they're seeing as a physician, sometimes there's not like that conversation is not happening.
That they're basically pointed in a direction without given a choice or any other options that, this might not be the best fit for you, right? Or giving them.
Yeah, because the default in a lot of times, not all the time, but the default in a lot of time is to use the treatments that are, the most efficacious, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some people, like they prefer less treatment, better quality of life. And that's a personal choice.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
So for somebody who doesn't, have an active diagnosis of breast cancer, is there any advice you would give to people to sort of stay ahead of the game or like help with early detection or something along the lines of like, okay, well, if this is going to be a problem in my life, how can I address it as soon as possible so it's the least.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so first of all, actually cancer is very common these days. So for breast cancer, the probability of a woman to develop breast cancer in her lifetime is 1 in 8, which is actually pretty high. Now, the good thing is if first of all, if caught early, it's very, very manageable. So, having screening, mammograms, the guidelines in the US is starting at the age of 40. So having the annual mammograms, that's very, very important, and not skipping them. But the other thing is, if the person has a family history of cancer, and actually on the app we do that, there's a number of questions where people can answer them to see if they meet criteria for genetic testing, inherited cancer testing. And if they do, they should really get tested. There's a lot of options now for people to do, and they don't need to be as drastic as, a prophylactic double mastectomy, which is what Angelina Jolie did. But, it could be increased screening, MRI screening. There's other ways to deal with this, but you can really do something about it. So that's what I would recommend.
You said mammograms. Now, one thing that shows up for me from my mom, my mom's really vocal and she talks to me about her healthcare journey or whatever. And one of the things she's always complained about is the mammogram machine. She's just like, I just think it's wild that it hasn't been, redesigned in all of this time, right? Like we haven't found a better, is that one of the new technologies to make that test at least more comfortable for people?
That's a great question. I think there's some research, but I'm not aware of anything that earth-shattering that changes that technology. But this is actually, it's interesting what you say, because it's the case across healthcare, right? Like at the end, if something is working and there's no real need to change it, it won't change. And the need, like the people that are vocal are patients. So that's another thing that we're trying to do, right? It's this notion of empowering patients is not only about helping them self-advocate, it's really about shifting the power in the healthcare system back to the patient. Today, the patient has zero power, right? Like we don't get to decide, we don't get to ultimately, when we do ultimately pay, but not, the big bill. And in that sense, we don't have a big say on what gets developed, what, gets prioritized, and that needs to change.
Yeah, I feel like that is a reflection of our priorities in healthcare, that it's the kind of thing that probably, I'm sure, is very uncomfortable for people. And there's probably a better way that things that can be done, especially even to your point around talking about the difference between chemotherapy and a targeted,
Yeah.
Like people have thought about it, and it's like, it would be nice that if you didn't have to have like such an uncomfortable test in order to find that out. It's sort of prohibitive in that way, just that it's just, uncomfortable.
Yeah, and one of the things that's in our mission is we want to improve outcomes and accelerate research. And you only accelerate research by, first of all, understanding what people need, and then talking about it, showing the data, showing that people, like more people would choose an option that delays chemotherapy than something else. These are all data that today we are not collecting in a systematic way in order to actually really change the way things are being done.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that this is your line of work. It is very needed, and definitely for people to have an avenue to be able to voice their opinions and become empowered. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And if people wanted to work with you, find you, or get in touch, what would be the way that you would direct them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first of all, and thank you for asking that question, because one of the reasons I'm also super excited to be on your podcast is, just the mission, what you guys are, like looking to do, and also in particular the role of women in this space. And so we're actively recruiting. We're recruiting all kinds of different roles, and I'm actively really, really trying to also recruit more women. So people should send us emails, jobs@outcomes4me.com, or go to our website, outcomes4me.com. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity to really make a difference, which is really what we're after.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like you are making a difference, and even the name of your company even reflects that too. So again, thank you for taking the time to share with me more about you and your organization, and I am very grateful to have our paths cross. So
Thank you so much. Thank you.